Now let's go over to Canada, where Justin Trudeau's tyrannical behaviour is manifesting in all sorts of disturbing ways. We've seen reporters and journalists targeted, tear-gassed alongside the peaceful protesters who have been seemingly become political targets, Douglas. They've had their funds seized, bank accounts frozen without a court order. It seems incredible this is happening in Canada.
It's incredible. We're going to have to get used to it, and we're going to have to wise up to what's happening very, very swiftly. This has been happening very fast. We talked about some of it last week. Just since we last spoke, it's gone radically worse in Canada. I mean, the Prime Minister has used laws which are meant to be used in wartime, and he's used them against a peaceful protest. All of this is on Justin Trudeau. You know, there is no need for any of this to have happened. Any reasonable democratic leader should have been able to listen to the concerns of peaceful protesters and try to effectively listen to their concerns, negotiate with them, pacify them where possible, give in where possible, and more. And from the very beginning, Justin Trudeau totally eschewed that possibility. He called all of his critics all of the worst names imaginable. He slandered the truckers. He slandered the supporters of the truckers. And now he's moved to the next phase, not just sending in the police to very brutally end the protest in Ottawa, but using legislation which I don't think any democratic government has previously used against its citizens, ordering banks to stop the accounts of people not only involved in the protests, but apparently supporting the protests. We've seen businesses targeted by the police. We saw the owner of a gelato shop fearing for her business because she'd made a small donation to the truckers' protest. This is absolutely totalitarian behaviour that's been going on from the Trudeau government. It's a scandal that in an ordinary season would have been brought up at the United Nations, but the democracies of the world don't seem to be caring about it. I hope the citizens of the democracies like us do.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. I've just been shocked by the lack of condemnation from world leaders. If they would have said something, if this sort of crackdown was happening in Cuba or somewhere in the Middle East, you've got peaceful protesters being absolutely monstered, and yet there seems to just be a level of comfort with it amongst other democracies. Is this a sign of what we can all expect down the track, that if you protest against a government, that they will punish you?
Well, it's just a nightmare scenario, and it's unfolding before our eyes in Canada. This is the sort of thing that people claimed in the sort of wildest people we might have said were conspiracy theorists, the sort of most hyperventilating sort of people might have said that, one day a democratic government will come for peaceful protesters and ensure that honest, decent, peaceful people can't even have a bank account and are effectively driven to the margins of not just the economy, but society as a whole. That was the sort of thing that you would have, you'd have sort of dismissed somebody even 6 months ago who claimed that. Here it is happening in Canada. And it's just no laughing matter for anybody, because if a democratic government can get away with this, they can get away with anything. And some people, of course, will say, well, I like Trudeau. I can't quite imagine who'd say that now. But there clearly are Canadians who say, I like Trudeau. And there will either be people who say, well, I dislike the truckers. Fine. We'll swap it the other way round. Imagine a situation where a government that agreed with the truckers, whose demands are not by any means outrageous, imagine if there was a government that agreed with the truckers and the protesters looked more like little Justin Trudeau. Well, how would they like it then? How would they like it when it was turned the other way round? How would they like it if a political idea more akin to that of the truckers crushed the Trudeau and Trudeauians and seized their bank accounts and froze their accounts and drove them to the margins of society and demeaned them and slandered them and called them all of the worst names and made things up about them until they were made the pariahs of society? That's the problem with this. There are people cheering it on because they think it supports their own ideology and their own political ends. Just imagine if it was the other way around, because one day it could be.
Absolutely, and it's been interesting to see Black Lives Matter, the organisation which is supposed to be against police brutality, do absolutely nothing about the police brutality we're seeing in Canada right now. You would think they would come out on principle and stand with the truckers, but that has not happened. Now, to another issue, after close to 2 years today, Australia's international borders are open to tourists, students, workers. Anyone can come in now as long as you've got a visa. But not everyone is excited. New data has revealed that despite multiple tourism campaigns, travellers from Britain don't want to come to Australia. In fact, according to survey respondents, Australia is ranked last among the destinations they plan to visit, behind North and South America, Asia, Africa and Europe. Why is this, Douglas? I thought we were the place to be, particularly for Brits.
I thought you were going to say below North and South Korea for a moment there, Rita. Yes, it's. Look, I mean, there are a lot of things that will be behind this, but one of them is, of course, that Australia has. Until Canada came along and superseded everyone, Australia has been seen to be one of the absolutely toughest states in the world, countries in the world in the last 2 years in relation to COVID. It's put on a very unappealing face, I think, to much of the world. And it's inevitable that, tourism isn't just going to pick up like that. It hasn't anywhere, by the way, which has put on that kind of unwelcoming face, because tourists, or potential tourists, quite understandably think, well, they went so far with all the lockdown stuff. Is there any certainty they're not going to get into all of that stuff again? I think it's going to take a long time, actually, for countries like Australia to get tourism back. And it's just not a surprise. I think it's a tragedy for the Australian tourism sector, which, goodness knows, like all tourism sectors around the world, needs the work, needs the business. But, people don't forget these things fast, just as I don't think they're going to forget Canada fast.